My husband reported me missing, and sobbed to my mother saying he'd do anything to get me back. But when I walked into our house 7 weeks later, I found my clothes in trash bags and a note that said, "You were never supposed to come back." I'm Camille. I was 41 when this all happened, and I'd been married for nearly 9 years to a man I thought I understood. We lived in Rhinebeck, New York, a quiet little town that makes people feel like they're living inside a painting. Brick sidewalks. Antique shops. Farms just 10 minutes away. The kind of place you settle in to raise a family. Except we never had kids. By choice, I'd thought. Julian, my husband, was 10 years older than me. He was a residential architect, well-read, soft-spoken, calm in a way that made you feel like nothing could go wrong when he was around. His presence was so steady that I used to joke he could be replaced by a houseplant in a cardigan and no one would notice. He didn't laugh at that one. But that's who he was. Reliable. Boring, maybe. But boring can feel like safety when you've been through chaos before. My 20s had been a mess, bad relationships, debt, job hopping. Julian was like a reset button. We didn't fight much. Maybe that's what made this all more surreal. Looking back now, I can see the quiet signs, the kind you only recognize when the walls start crumbling. It started with a friend inviting me up to Vermont for a 10-day creative retreat. She had a cabin near Stowe, and she was hosting a small group of women to write, paint, disconnect. I thought it was exactly what I needed. I'd been feeling restless. Like I was standing in a room I used to love, but suddenly everything felt unfamiliar. Julian said I should go. Clear your head. Get some quiet. That was it. No protest. No warmth either. Just a green light. I left at dawn. Wrote him a note, left it on the coffee table. Told him I'd text when I arrived. The first few days in Vermont were peaceful. Cold air, foggy mornings, the smell of pine everywhere. But on the third day, my phone charger stopped working. By day 4, the battery was dead. The cabin had no cell reception, and the nearest town was a 40-minute drive away on steep roads. I wasn't panicked. I figured I'd deal with it after the retreat ended. Around day 10, I drove into town, bought a new charger, and when I turned my phone on, I had no missed calls. Not a single voicemail. Just a few texts from a cousin and one spam message. Nothing from Julian. That's when I felt the first real chill. Still, I thought, maybe he assumed I was just off-grid. I emailed him that night from a library. Told him I'd decided to stay a few more weeks. That I needed the space, and that I was doing some work with a local artist on a documentary idea. I told him I'd be back by early June. I never got a reply. I should have gone home then. But honestly, I didn't want to. It felt better to be away. I'd wake up and breathe without tension in my chest. I didn't miss the way Julian cleared his throat every time I started talking about something I cared about. I didn't miss how he started sleeping with his back turned. By the time I returned home, 7 weeks later, it felt like I'd lived a whole other life. But nothing prepared me for what I came back to. The house looked different. Cleaner. Emptier. The porch light was off, which was strange. Julian always left it on when he knew I'd be coming home late. I walked up the steps slowly. My bag strap dug into my shoulder. I tried the key. It didn't fit. At first I thought I had the wrong one. I'd been gone a while, maybe grabbed the spare from the drawer. I tried again. Nothing. I stood there, dazed, until a neighbor walked by with her golden retriever. "Camille," she said. I smiled, unsure. "Hi, Julia." She stopped. Looked me up and down like she was seeing a ghost. I thought you were gone." I gave a confused laugh. "I was up north. Just got back." "Julian's not home?" Her eyes shifted. "I don't know." She kept walking. Something in my stomach turned. I walked around the back of the house and climbed in through the old mudroom window Julian always said we needed to fix. The air inside smelled different. The kind of clean you only get when someone scrubbed everything with lemon-scented ammonia. All the throw pillows were different. New curtains. No coats in the entryway closet. And then I saw it, the framed photo of us in the hallway, replaced by a watercolor of sunflowers. That's when I started running room to room. Our bedroom, my side of the closet, empty. Dresser drawers cleared out. No hairbrush. No toothbrush. I opened the guest room door, and there they were, 4 trash bags. All my things. Inside, my clothes, wrinkled and perfumed with mold. My journals. My old flip-flops. The photo booth pictures from Coney Island tucked between 2 coats. And taped to one of the bags, just one line, scribbled in blue ink. You were never supposed to come back. I just stood there. For maybe 5 minutes. Not crying. Not angry. Just still. Like someone had hit pause on my nervous system. I called Julian. Voicemail. I texted, "What is going on?" "I'm home." "Where are you?" "Nothing." I drove to my mom's house. She opened the door and nearly fainted. "Jesus Christ," she whispered. "Camille?" I dropped my bag in the hallway. "Hi, Mom." She pulled me inside and grabbed my face like she thought I was an illusion. "Where were you?" Julian said, "He said you were missing." "Camille, we called the police. He was here, crying. He thought you were dead. We thought you'd done something horrible." I stared at her. I emailed him. I told him where I was. He said you stormed out after a fight. That you left your phone. He said he begged you not to go. He filed a report. We searched the river trails. I've been going to therapy. I sat down on her couch, shaking. He lied, I said. He never even told me he was worried. He changed the locks. Mom, my stuff was in garbage bags. There was a note. It said I was never supposed to come back. She covered her mouth. Later that night, I went back to the house. I waited. At 11:13 p.m., Julian pulled into the driveway. I watched from the living room window. He got out, alone, carrying Thai takeout. He walked through the front door and froze. We stared at each other. His face didn't show shock. It showed something colder. Resignation. "Camille," he said. Like he was greeting someone at a funeral. I didn't say anything. Just picked up one of the trash bags and dropped it at his feet. "You were never supposed to come back?" I said. He looked away. Sat down slowly on the couch. "You were gone a long time. You knew where I was. I didn't get your email. You changed the password." Silence. Then, calmly, "There's someone else." He didn't flinch. Didn't beg. Didn't cry. "She moved in 3 weeks ago," he added. Like he was giving a weather update. "Is she here now?" "No. She's staying at her sister's for a bit." "How long has it been?" "A year." I felt nothing. Not yet. Not anger. Just cold, heavy disbelief. He was so still. So composed. Like he'd been rehearsing this moment, over and over, preparing for it like a performance. He folded his hands in his lap and said, almost gently, "She's pregnant." That's when I stood up. But I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just said, "You could have just asked for a divorce." He looked at me, and for a second, I thought maybe he would say he was sorry. But instead, he said, "I didn't want to be the bad guy." I picked up my bags. Walked out. That night, I slept in my car. I woke up in a grocery store parking lot at 5:17 a.m. The sun was just starting to break through the clouds, and the windows of my car were fogged up from my breath. I'd curled up in the back seat, using my coat as a pillow, with one of my trash bags under my feet. Somewhere between humiliation and heartbreak, sleep had taken me like a sedative. I didn't cry. Not then. The human body has a strange way of preserving itself in moments of collapse. It freezes you. Like you're in a dream where none of it is real. I think that's why I felt nothing at all when I sat in the cafe that morning, sipping a burnt cup of coffee, staring into space while people bustled around me like nothing was wrong. Because to them, nothing was. I stayed in that cafe for hours. Around noon, I booked a room at a motel off Route 9. Not the kind you want to post about on Instagram: faded floral bedspreads, flickering hallway lights, and a vending machine that made a grinding noise like it was choking every time it dispensed something. But it was shelter. It was something. I spent the next 2 days there, barely speaking to anyone except the woman at the front desk who kept calling me Han with an odd mix of pity and impatience. I didn't tell my mom I was in town. I couldn't bear the questions yet. I think she knew that. She sent one text: "Please let me know you're safe. I'm here. No questions, I promise." I didn't reply right away. What haunted me most wasn't Julian cheating. It wasn't even Elise, the woman I hadn't met, who was now walking through my house barefoot, probably using my kettle, sleeping on my side of the bed. It was the fact that he had erased me. Deliberately. Methodically. He'd lied to my mother. Filed a missing person report. Told the police I was emotionally unstable and had left during a mental episode. I saw the report myself. He never mentioned my email. He'd told them he was afraid I'd hurt myself. That he didn't want to believe the worst. He wasn't just trying to live without me, he was trying to rewrite me. I contacted the police and gave them a statement, showed them the email I'd sent from the library. They were polite but dismissive. Said it was a domestic misunderstanding. That maybe there was confusion on both sides. They closed the case, made no corrections to the original report. Just like that, my vanishing was a non-event. By the third day, I realized I couldn't afford to live in that motel forever. So I called my friend Miranda, the one with the Vermont cabin. When she picked up, she sounded breathless. "Camille? Jesus. Where have you been?" "I'm back," I said, simply. She didn't ask questions. "Come here. I'm serious. I've got a spare room. You can stay as long as you want." I packed up what little I had and drove back north. It was in the quiet of that drive, 4 hours of winding roads, trees flying past the window like ghosts, that the crying finally came. Not the dramatic movie kind, just steady, leaking grief that blurred the road and soaked the collar of my sweatshirt. I had to pull over at one point. I sat there in a gas station lot, forehead against the steering wheel, trying to remember how I'd ended up here. And more terrifying, how I hadn't seen it coming. Miranda welcomed me like family. No questions, no judgment. Her cabin had a little bedroom upstairs that overlooked the woods, and that's where I stayed. 4 weeks. She fed me. Let me help her with small things, organizing old art supplies, editing her grant applications. I slept deeply for the first time in months. One night, she made a fire, poured us 2 glasses of wine, and said softly, "You don't have to tell me everything. But you should talk about it. It's going to rot inside you if you don't." I stared at the flames for a while, then said, "He moved another woman in before I even got back. He told my mom I was missing. Filed a report. Then packed my life into trash bags. Like I was disposable." She nodded slowly, eyes steady. "And now you're here. Which means he failed. You came back." That stuck with me. I came back. The woman he thought would disappear didn't. A week later, I drove down to Rhinebeck with a legal pad and a folder full of documents. I went to a lawyer, a woman named Priya who wore vintage boots and had a voice like a blade. I told her everything. She listened, took notes, didn't blink. "He tried to create a paper trail to discredit you," she said. He might have even been prepping for a legal death in absentia claim if you stayed gone long enough. Financially, emotionally, he wanted a clean exit. But why not just divorce me? I asked again, even though I already knew. She smiled grimly. Because some people need to be the victim, even when they're the villain. She helped me file for separation the next day. I asked for nothing but the house. I wanted him gone. Julian sent a message through his lawyer. He wanted to buy me out of the house. Offered above market rate. Said it was foreclosure. I refused. I sold it to a young couple instead. A veterinarian and a school teacher. I didn't care about the money. I just wanted him out. Out of that house. Out of my name. Out of my story. When he found out, he emailed me directly for the first time. The subject line, "You win." I didn't open it. Instead, I drove back to Vermont and started looking for places to rent nearby. I wasn't ready to buy again. But I wanted my own space. A little cottage, maybe. Something small and bright. Something I could lock from the inside. One morning, Miranda found me at the kitchen table with a notepad. I was writing down ideas, fragments of thoughts about what had happened to me. Not just the betrayal, but the erasure. The way a person can slowly sandpaper you out of your own life. You ever think about starting a podcast? She asked, pouring coffee. I laughed. No. Why? Because your story would make people stop what they're doing and listen. You've got that kind of story, Cam. It started as a joke. But the idea stuck. A month later, I recorded the first episode of what would become Ghosts in the Suburbs. I didn't name names. I didn't trash Julian. I told the story the way I experienced it, quietly, honestly. I wanted it to be about more than just him. About the way people get rewritten. Discarded. Replaced. And how they come back anyway. I recorded the episode in one take, sitting in Miranda's upstairs room with a cheap mic and a blanket over my head to muffle the echo. I told the story like I was talking to one person. Someone sitting in their car, parked outside a house they're afraid to go back into. Someone who needed to know they weren't alone. By the end, I was shaking. I uploaded it and went for a walk. That night, I checked the stats. 47 downloads. The next morning? 312, the next week? 6,000 people messaged me. Some shared their own stories, a vanishing in plain sight, a betrayal that felt like murder, a being forgotten and finding themselves again. One woman wrote, "You're telling the story I was too afraid to say out loud." And just like that, my silence became something else. My erasure became a voice. The podcast picked up slowly at first, but by the third episode, titled "The Girl in the Guest Room Closet," it hit a nerve. I talked about the moment I found my life bagged up like leftovers, left to rot in the room we used to host his sister on Thanksgiving. People messaged me after that one. They weren't just listeners. They were survivors. Some of them had stories far worse than mine: marriages abandoned without warning, whole families discarded like clutter, people who came home from work to find locks changed and bank accounts emptied. A man from Idaho messaged me saying he'd lived in his car for 2 months after his partner ghosted him and changed the lease without telling him. A woman from Ontario said her ex-husband faked a cancer diagnosis to justify an affair, and when she finally left him, he told their kids she chose to abandon them. There's something eerie about how quietly people can ruin you. No screaming. No violence. Just a slow erasure. A calculated silence. A switch flipped. Like they decided one morning that you were just done. Julian had been quiet his whole life. People called it maturity. I called it emotional constipation. But what I realized, what really shook me, is that silence isn't always kindness. Sometimes it's the weapon they use so no one hears the crime. By fall, I'd moved into a small bungalow outside Montpelier. 2 bedrooms. One for sleeping, one for dreaming. It had a slanted porch and a kitchen with yellow tiles I couldn't decide whether to love or hate. I adopted a senior cat from a rescue shelter. Her name was Gingersnap. She'd lost one eye and had a mean streak, but she liked curling up on my keyboard while I edited episodes. I felt weirdly seen by her. My mom visited once. Just once. She brought me a tin of those butter cookies no one ever finishes and told me she still had dreams about Julian crying at her kitchen table. He was so broken, Cam, she said. I know he lied. But I just keep seeing his face that day. He was shaking. I didn't say anything. Because I understood something now that I couldn't explain to her. He wasn't crying because I was missing. He was crying because I was gone, because he thought the lie had worked. Because he was almost free. It took a long time for her to see that. To stop seeing Julian as a man who grieved me, and start seeing him as someone who built a narrative where I had to disappear so he wouldn't have to look like the villain. I didn't make her pick sides. I knew what guilt could do to a person. But she never brought up his name again. The podcast kept growing. Not viral. Not fame. But community. A slow ripple of people passing the link to others who needed it. I interviewed therapists. Attorneys. Women who rebuilt their lives from motel rooms and car trunks. One woman told me her husband had faked a job overseas and lived with another family for 3 years before she found out. Another woman's sister tried to get her declared mentally incompetent so she could take her share of an inheritance. I started calling them quiet crimes. Things that weren't illegal, maybe. But they stripped people of dignity. Of trust. Of identity. I started getting recognized in the oddest places, at the farmer's market, in a bookstore. Women with tired eyes and tight smiles would walk up and say, "I heard you. I thought I was crazy until I listened to your voice." I always said thank you. But I never knew what else to say. Because I wasn't a guru. I didn't have answers. I had survival. I had trash bags filled with sweaters that didn't smell like me anymore. I had silence that used to be someone I loved. And I had a microphone. Julian tried to call again about 6 months after I left the house for good. I still had his number blocked, but he found a way around it by emailing me from a business account I didn't recognize. The subject line, just a conversation. I didn't open it. But I saw the preview in the inbox. I think about you every day. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I was scared. It was all too fast. Elise and I deleted it. Because I realized, in that moment, that his guilt wasn't about me. It never had been. It was about him getting caught in a lie he thought he could control. About the version of himself he built for the world unraveling under pressure. He didn't want to fix it. He just wanted forgiveness to plug the hole in his reputation. And I wasn't giving him that gift. I started journaling again. Not for the podcast. Just for me. About the things I never said aloud, that I used to pretend to fall asleep before he came to bed. That I'd been searching for apartments on Zillow months before Vermont. That part of me had been relieved when I found my stuff bagged up, because it meant I didn't have to pretend anymore. There was no house to fight for. No marriage to save. Just space. A hollow I could fill with something new. I went through my old journals one afternoon, things I hadn't opened in years. Pages where I'd written things like, "Why don't I feel like I'm in the room even when I'm in the room?" And "He touches me like a person doing a chore." And I realized something heartbreaking: I'd been disappearing long before I ever left. It wasn't Vermont that made me go missing. It was him. Every time he looked past me. Every time he spoke about me like I was a story he'd already finished reading. That night, I recorded a new episode. I called it Vanishing Points. I talked about all the tiny ways people vanish before anyone notices they're gone. The way they laugh less. Shrink into themselves. Start folding their own joy into apology. I said, sometimes, we don't disappear all at once. We go piece by piece, quietly, until the only person who knows we're still alive is us. And if we're lucky, we fight our way back, one breath at a time. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't empowering in the trendy, Instagrammable sense. But it was real. And people felt it. I received over 1,000 messages that week. And one letter. A real letter, handwritten, postmarked from upstate New York. The return address was familiar. Too familiar. It wasn't from Julian. It was from Elise. The envelope was plain. No stickers, no colors. Just my name written in sharp, neat handwriting, block letters like someone who didn't want emotion to show through their pen. Elise. I stared at it for days. It sat on my coffee table like a wound I didn't want to open. Part of me was afraid she was writing to gloat. Or to defend him. Or to ask me to understand their truth. But when I finally opened it, I wasn't ready for what I read. Camille, I don't know how to begin this without sounding ridiculous or hypocritical. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I knew about you. From the beginning. He told me you were pulling away. That you were struggling with depression, that you'd been talking about separation for months. He said you didn't want kids. That he'd tried. That he'd begged. I believed him. I met you once, by accident, before I even realized it. You came into the firm to drop off lunch, remember? You smiled at me like you didn't know I was anything more than a colleague. Because I wasn't, at the time. I saw the episode of your podcast. I recognized the story before you even mentioned the trash bags. I knew. And I realized I'd been part of the lie. He packed up your life before he ever told me he'd filed a report. He told me you left him. That you ran off without a word. When you came back, he panicked. Not because he missed you. Because he was afraid of losing what he built. I'm not with him anymore. I left last month. I'm keeping the baby, but not the illusion. I wanted you to know, I'm sorry. For helping him erase you. Even if I didn't know it at first, I kept quiet once I did. That's on me. I hope your voice keeps getting louder. Elise. I sat with the letter for a long time. It didn't hit me like a punch. It wasn't even satisfying at first. But it planted something. A slow, blooming clarity. She had left him. On her own. No dramatic revenge needed. No public humiliation. Just the simple act of walking away with truth in her hands. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Because by then, I had already started planning something bigger. Something quiet. But sharp. I called a local journalist I'd been working with for an episode about legal manipulation in divorce cases. She had connections to a regional storytelling conference, one of those TED-style events in Albany with big audiences and even bigger potential reach. I pitched her a talk, Vanishing While Alive, How People Reclaim Their Story After Erasure. She said yes. I spent a month writing it. Not a script, but a story. Raw, real. Not just about Julian, but about the thousands of people who'd written to me, whose spouses, siblings, even parents had tried to erase their existence. And how they'd fought their way back into their own narratives. The day of the event, I wore all white. Not for drama. For clarity. I told the story beginning to end. I didn't mention names. I didn't need to. But I told the audience how it felt to be mourned by someone who wanted me gone. How betrayal isn't always a knife, it's sometimes a vacuum. A slow sucking away of presence, of memory, of voice. And then I ended with this: sometimes, revenge isn't fire. It's rebuilding in full daylight, where they can see you. It's being louder than the silence they left behind. The room stood up before I even left the stage. That clip went viral. Not viral in the millions, viral in the meaningful. Therapists emailed me. Support groups quoted me. Divorce lawyers used my episodes as resources. A group of women in Oregon started a book club based on stories from my show. And then the full circle moment came. A few months later, I got a message request on Instagram. I didn't recognize the name. His profile was private. But the bio said, Julian. Architect. Dad. I didn't open it. I just stared at that one word. Dad. Because in some alternate life, I was supposed to be in that picture. But instead, I was here, standing in a life I'd built, from ashes and podcasts and truth. I wasn't erased. I was read. And not just by him. By everyone. And that was the real revenge. Because now, when people look up my name, they don't see a missing person report. They see my voice. They see someone who came back. And stayed. Not in his story. In mine.